All right, you are listening to or watching the Process on Tap podcast slash live stream. Got to work on that introduction now that we're doing live and audio. My name is Jeremy. You can find me on Twitter at Back of the Herd. With me, as per usual, I have Hansel. You can find him on Twitter at Uber Hansen, and one of the newest contributors to Cover One. And then also with me is Thomas. You can find him on Twitter at the Thomas DeLas, and also the host of Buffalo Late Night, which is Monday nights. Thomas, correct?
Monday nights, 9:30.
All right. So last week we did the running back room projections, like some over under on statistics form. Today we are just doing the receiving room, which is wide receiver and tight ends. We might do a little bit of running backs at the end. So first off, Hansel, Thomas, you guys did a 53-man roster projection was the first one we did a few weeks back. Do you guys want to share what your prediction was for the wide receiver room? Did you guys have an agreement, or was it slightly different?
I've actually got mine right here. Perfect.
Yeah, give me yours, Thomas, because I don't remember. I think there was one difference. So I'll let you go first.
Mine difference was I had a weird hot take and said that we could potentially sign Odell Beckham Jr. down the road.
Okay.
But so I had Diggs, Davis, McKenzie, Shakir, and Crowder. I think the tough one, was what you're going to see with this one. I think Jake Kumaro is probably going to make the roster. I'd be very surprised if he didn't. It's just seeming more and more like he's kind of become a favorite, not only for his special teams abilities, but it just is kind of like a steady hand. I don't know. It's tough because I feel like, in terms of what we perceive, what they want, it's hard to say because they have a bunch of slot guys, right? But they've got Duke Johnson, they've got James Cook, they've got Isaiah McKenzie, they've got Khalil Shakir, they've got Jamison Crowder. They've got a lot of guys that do a lot of similar things, which I feel like overcomplicates things. I just feel like there's just too many of the same. So I am not exactly sure what's going to happen. We're going to get a lot of clarity in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, Kyle Napiorella, Naps for short, actually made a tweet the other day. It was actually kind of saying how he thinks that our depth at outside corner is kind of weak, and I thought that was a pretty fair point. Thomas, like you said, the bulk of who we assume is going to make the room are primarily slot and gadget guys. Now, granted, McKenzie, sure he can play outside. Jameson Crowder, sure he can play outside, but like you said, they are primarily slot guys. But yeah, after Diggs and Davis, those are kind of, I think, the only like straightforward outside guys. So, so you said Diggs, Davis, Crowder, McKenzie, Shakur, and Kumaro.
Yeah, and then I think you could. I mean, the question, which apparently has looked pretty good so far. I mean, granted, who cares? It's OTAs and minicamp, means next to nothing. Is Isaiah Hodgins, and I really am interested to see, because the one thing the team lacks is size. Quite frankly, there's a ton of wide receivers that are just 6'1", 6 foot, or McKenzie was like 5'2". So we definitely need size in terms of the wide receiver room, and Hodgins he brings that in spades. But yeah, I don't know. The thing about it is, when it comes to the Bills, you're going to see, so like offensive line, defensive line, there's a ton of people that are hogging up spots. So it depends on what they do with that, which I think is then in turn going to probably play into the wide receiver room. And the same thing with running backs. Depending on what they do with running backs, you could see if let's say they don't keep a Duke Johnson or a Zach Moss, maybe they keep an extra wide receiver to do the same kind of similar role to what maybe a Duke Johnson could do. I don't know. It just, those are the guys I have. The two main guys outside of Davis and Diggs. I would say everything's kind of up in the air.
Hansel, what was your difference?
Yeah, so we were actually the same from the sounds of it. So I had the same, what was it, these 6 receivers. I do think Hodgins actually has a kind of a path to the roster for what Thomas said, like the size. We really don't have depth when it comes to outside guys because we're lacking in size. Tavon Austin, I know people are kind of obsessed with him right now, but again, it's OTAs. I think people forget he's 32 years old. He hasn't really been a major factor in the NFL in quite some time, if not ever. So I don't know how Tavon Austin makes it unless he runs away with the return duties, both punt and kick, which I don't really see happening. So I think the same 6. The one thing I'll say when it comes to like the issue with size outside, because that's clearly an issue. I do think the addition of OJ Howard kind of alleviates that slightly. So you're going to see a lot more 12 personnel this season where we have, OJ Howard and Dawson Knox on the field at the same time, which then kind of reduces the need for, let's say, size on the outside, right? We could run smaller guys on the outside to actually create mismatches. So I actually just pulled this up because I was interested in this. The Bills ran 12 personnel last season, 8% of the time. For 100 snaps total. That was by far the lowest in the NFL, like by far.
Anthony Prohaska, he tweeted a week or two ago that over the last 3 years, the Bills' usage of 12 personnel was either dead last or second to last.
It's like eight. It's like 8. I think. Would you say 8%?
Yeah, 8%. Yeah.
Yeah, 8%. It's almost negligible, to be honest with you. But the one thing Ryan Talbot did say, which I thought was quite interesting, is you could see him disguise a lot of things too,
Sure.
and make it look like they're doing different things than they are because they have a lot of guys that are quite multiple. They that's the one thing I almost feel like with the Bills offense, outside of Josh in the line, they're finding a lot of guys that are quite positionless. Which allows them a ton of flexibility. And just like with what you've got in Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer and how they're incredible at disguising different schemes, I feel like you could potentially see that as well on the offensive side by having guys like James Cook that can line up, or start off in the backfield, but then in lining up in the slot. So
another slot guy to throw in there and
right, but it makes it incredibly difficult
out there at once.
Right.
Yeah.
It just makes it difficult for them to have to figure it out. And especially if you run like an up tempo or a no huddle offense, the defense is not going to be able to switch guys out, which is going to make it really difficult when you got shifty, small, fast, quick burst guys that can get open in the flat. I just think you're going to see potentially a little bit more, like I've said before, a little more wrinkles in terms of their offense and maybe a little bit more disguising of what they're actually going to do.
Yeah. And Thomas makes a good point there. Like, the Bills, and I've been watching them try to do this for years and years now. They're essentially trying to set up a situation where they have a bunch of different mismatches that they can play around with, where let's say they can get Dawson Knox on a slow middle linebacker. Like if they can get that, Dawson Knox is going to get open. If Diggs isn't doubled, Diggs is going to get open. If McKenzie's on you're like a big nickel, for instance, McKenzie's going to beat that big nickel. So they have this ability this season where they can run just like line James Cook up in the backfield, just run a halfback dive right up the middle of James Cook. And maybe say they're playing Miami goes big. Well, now they can split James Cook outside, run no huddle essentially, and keep Miami stuck with their personnel and just keep moving with all these mismatches. One more thing I want to throw out about that 12 personnel grouping, just because I think it's funny. Bills 8% last season, dead last. The average in the NFL was 21%. And the only team that was over 30%, 12 personnel over 30% of the time was Miami. And Miami played 12 personnel 61% of the time. That is absurd. The second most is 29%.
But in fairness, isn't Gesicki just like a big wide receiver?
Yeah, exactly. He plays on the outside sometimes too.
Yeah.
I think he played out of the slot a bunch. So that's a good point.
So it wasn't really a point. I was more just kind of
not that matters because 2 is garbage anyway.
That's a good point.
Question for you guys: how much more 12 personnel do you see the Bills trying to do, like percentage wise?
5% more, if I mean, I don't see it. I would be surprised because obviously you're going to teeter between like maybe 10 personnel or 21 personnel, especially with James Cook, Devin Singletary. You might see both. out there. I would be surprised if it teeters because they're not going to really move out of 11 personnel all that much. I mean, that's their bread and butter. I would guess they're probably in 11 70% of the time. I think they were in at 74 last year, I believe. There's only, I think they're the 5th team in the NFL in terms of how much they use 11 personnel. But yeah, I can't see it that much of a difference. What I really think is going to happen, and it could be similar to what Hansel said, you could see OJ Howard is kind of not really a tight end per se, but they could use him in the slot or they can use him in the outside because he's done both. And still quantify that 11 personnel. But yeah, I don't think it's gonna be that much. The thing about it is when you do 11 personnel, or 12 personnel, that means you're taking a wide receiver off the field. And who are you taking off the field for OJ Howard? Because I'll be honest with you, as of this point, OJ Howard has coming off of an Achilles injury or some type of injury in his leg. And I just don't know how effective he's truly going to be, or if he's going to have the same bursts as an Isaiah McKenzie or a Khalil Shakir, Jamison Crowder for that matter. So I would guess 5% at the max. So is it 8? So maybe no more than, I would say 15% is probably the absolute tippy top.
What do you think, Hansel?
I like that. Actually, before Thomas said that, I probably was going to go a little higher, but the way he described it, I definitely side with. And the main argument there is to put OJ Howard on the field means you're taking a receiver off the field. And we just talked about all the slot options the Bills have, Crowder, McKenzie, Shakir, and all 3 of those guys are well, we believe Shakir's talented. We have to see that before we can say that. I've seen McKenzie destroy a team, the Patriots last year. I'm super high on Jamison Crowder. As just a typical slot guy. I think he's been very good his entire NFL career. He just really hasn't had a quarterback throwing to him essentially. So I can see the Bills again try to set up mismatches, but at the end of the day, yeah, they're going to run 12 personnel from time to time. I think one thing OJ Howard might give the Bills the ability to do, give Dawson Knox a break. Dawson Knox played 96% of the snaps most games, something like that, something crazy. Giving him a kind of a breather here and there, so he's full bore at the end of a game might be important to the Bills this season.
Plus, you can't risk injuring him either. I mean, that's the other thing is keeping Dawson Knox healthy because you saw how effective he was in the playoffs.
Yeah, I got to agree with Thomas. I know people talk about, they might be running 12 more, and that's kind of why I wanted to get an answer from you guys. Sure, I can see them running more, but I don't see them running too much more because I don't think they can put too many eggs in the 12 personnel basket. Because I mean, if OJ Howard or Dawson Knox, if one of them gets injured, there's nobody else who's going to be able to go in there and keep up that game script. So I was curious, and I think you guys we're on the same page. So a little bit more, not a whole lot more. If it clicks and Knox and Howard are both healthy and they're just doing awesome, then maybe we can see. But I think it depends on the health of both of them and just how well it works off. But yeah, I don't see a whole lot happening.
The one last point on it is, again, and I keep on the topic of mismatches, is if you go 12 personnel, let's say you go 12 personnel and you put Singletary in the backfield, not Cook, you're going to force the opposition to bring on a slower package. So essentially, bigger bodies that can defend, Knox and OJ, and then at the same time fill gaps in case Singletary is running the ball. So they're going to slow down their defense. Then you have Josh step back to pass, and one of his biggest weapons that everyone knows is his legs. So if you have slow linebackers on the field, big linebackers on the field that are trying to keep up with, a Knox and a Howard, it in theory can open up the ground game for Allen more than Singletary, for instance. And so I think you could see, say the Bills are all right, we want to run some clock at the end of the game. I don't necessarily want Josh Allen running the football on design runs over and over again. But if the Bills are all right, we need a first down, it's 2nd and 5, maybe we go 12 personnel just so we can get Allen out on a boot where he can beat the defenders in the second level.
Talking about the wide receivers, I have something I want to talk about, and I'm going to kind of put you guys both on the spot. Hansel, you made a tweet a week or two ago. I believe you listed Isaiah McKenzie, Khalil Shakur, Tavon Austin, and Jamison Crowder, and said you have to pick 3 of those 4 to make it.
Mhm.
And Thomas, you commented and chose the 3 excluding Jamison Crowder. And I thought that was interesting. I think people who don't think Crowder is going to make the team is a very interesting take. I'm curious if you kind of would like to elaborate on that take and, share like a way you can see Crowder not making the 53.
Yeah. Well, one, I think Isaiah McKenzie is as close to a lock as you would get outside of Diggs and Davis. I think the Bills we look at McKenzie, right? And I think we like McKenzie. I don't think we look at McKenzie like the front office looks at McKenzie. And I think they have a lot of adoration for McKenzie. I think they really believe in the kid. He has done everything right. He does everything they ask. If he makes a mistake, he had a couple bad games, and like when he dropped the kickoff return and came right back and just kept his head up, which is a huge testament to who he is.
Well, he's the face of the franchise. He's got to
100%, 100%. Yeah. I think he's absolutely there. I think I'd be stunned if, and I've said this before, I said this to Greg Tomset. I think Khalil Shakir would have to have the worst training camp ever to not make the team, just because of his skill set. And a 5th round pick, that was Matt Milano was a 5th round pick. You don't just dump those, especially Brandon Beane, and especially in the NFL where wide receivers are getting more and more expensive. You don't draft a wide receiver and then let them walk, especially a guy like Khalil Shakir who has shown promise.
I think he would have to have like the worst training camp. He'd probably have to pull like a Sammy Watkins, like get injured, not treat it seriously, talk about partying all night, and like go up to Sean McDermott and straight up be like, "Football's stupid. Like, why are any of us here?" Like that's
you'd have to tear it all down.
Yeah,
absolutely. And then so Tavon Austin, I think, is one of those feel-good stories. And I told again Greg Thompson, because that he said he would take all the allowable money that he could bet to say that doesn't happen. And I responded. I told him, I was like, part of it is
happen? I'm sorry,
that Tavon makes the roster over Crowder. And my opinion is, one, I want Tavon to make it because from hearing him talk, he seems like a very incredible person, like just downright one of those people that knows he's gone through stuff and is still fighting, defies age. And you know what? If he can come out here, because his best season's like 500 yards or something like that, and I think that was when he was back with the St. Louis Rams. That's how long ago. I'm not sure there's a huge difference, and I hate to say this. I'm not sure there's a huge difference between Jamison Crowder and Tavon Austin. Jamison Crowder was with the Jets for a number of years, albeit not a great group of quarterbacks, but never set the world on fire. And he was like one of their primary targets for a number of years. So I can't say that he's going to beat anybody, and he hasn't been able to stay healthy at all. I mean, Jamison Crowder's been pretty inconsistent in terms of his health patterns. So I don't know. For me, it was more of the other two obvious. I think personally, I think Khalil Shakir is going to have a nice year if he can get an opportunity to get on the field. And obviously McKenzie, I think, is just waiting for his number to be called. Then I think it's the other two. And I don't necessarily think it's cut and dry. But to be honest with you, both of them could get cut for all we know. I mean, they both might not make the goddamn roster. So who knows? I mean, they could be leaning. Those two could be the one cut, and Isaiah Hodgins could make the roster. I have no idea. But if I had to pick, I would rather go with Tavon Austin, just because it's kind of a reclamation story for a guy that, everybody kind of forgot about, and he was a 1st-round pick. And, maybe he's like, you know what? Because I don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of guys come to Buffalo and thrive. And they thrive big, and they revitalize their careers and turn around and make something of themselves. So you know what? If anybody could do it, I feel like Tavon Austin's the perfect story. And if he even has a modicum of the speed he once had, fine. That's like tail end John Brown, and John Brown was still fast.
Hansel, anything?
Yeah, I like McKenzie. I think again, Thomas hit the nail on the head with McKenzie. I do think a big part of him is his personality, and the Bills always talk about culture, culture, culture. And culture is extremely important to this team, and I think that's the reason, one of the main reasons they've been so successful. McKenzie's part of that. Like, there's all these kind of goofy videos where Micah Hyde's like, I can't stand that guy, but I love him. Or you see, like, when they did his America's Got Talent thing, he had the whole team there cheering for him. Like, he is beloved by the team, and therefore I believe he's beloved by the franchise itself. So I think McKenzie's, again, just about a lock. His price tag's so low, and they have him for 2 years, like both seasons. Next season the cap hit goes up to 2.5. This season the cap hit's 1.9, which is pennies compared to like what he could conceivably do if he was, when he's given the opportunity. Moving on from McKenzie, Shakir, you guys both kind of described it. Like, he would have to not only have a terrible camp, like football wise, he'd have to have some major off the field issue not to make this team. The Bills drafted him in the 5th round, and they wanted him in the 4th round. They traded those picks to get who was it? They moved up to get James Cook, and they used the 4th round picks, saying, "Hey, we know we're not going to be able to get Shakir now, but man, we wish we could get him." So then when he fell in the 5th, they moved back up in the 5th to take him. So they looked at him as a 4th round pick, and you don't cut a 4th round pick in their first year. It wouldn't make any sense. And then the last two, Jamison Crowder and Tavon Austin. I will say I don't think it's 100% Crowder. I do personally think Crowder makes the roster, not Tavon Austin. But Tavon's ability in the return game is something that I'm going to focus on basically all camp, because that's my biggest concern on this roster right now. We do not have a return guy. I know people say put McKenzie back there. I know people will say, put Tavon Austin back there, put Shakir back there, I've even seen people mention James Cook. Those all concern me. I want a guy that I can fully trust their hands in the return game, and none of those guys have at least showed me or have the experience to do that. Tavon Austin also has fumbling issues in the return game, but not as bad as, for instance, Isaiah McKenzie on a punt return by punt return basis if you compare their career stats. I don't see it happening. Again, Austin being 32. And the one thing with Crowder is he's different than Cole Beasley, but he's got a little bit of that Cole Beasley in him where he can find those open spots underneath. And I can't just lose that this year. Like, I don't think people realize how big of a loss Cole Beasley truly is. That's a big concern to me, because he was Allen's safety blanket. Allen would, could scan the field. He could sit in the pocket for a little bit, but he always knew, I can go to Cole Beasley, dump the ball off. I'll get 5 yards. He'll fall to the ground right away, but at least I get 5 yards. Now,
yeah, but I think that Beasley absolutely lost a step last year, and even with that, I mean, you saw that Josh was. My brain just shut off there. My apologies. Josh absolutely was still able to excel, and even more so. And I think part of the reason that you might not have to worry about him is that Davis is going to fill that void. Davis is going to step up, and he's not a slot guy, but you've got a conglomerate of guys that could potentially fill the void just for what a slower, Beasley was.
Yeah, I mean, again, my thing with Beasley is I don't personally think he really lost. Maybe he lost a little bit of a step. I don't really think he lost much. I know the yardage was down. He had the same exact number of catches. He was still a first down machine. Like, he didn't have the near 900 yards receiving he had 2 years ago when he was an All-Pro, but they didn't need him to do that. And the other thing is, I know people always talk about, like, they'll use Yak as an example of why he lost a step. Well, Cole had a better Yak than Diggs, and like, I guess I can concede a little bit and say, yeah, he definitely was starting to show his age. I don't think it was to a point where I don't want Cole Beasley on this football team. I think Beasley's still a better slot option than anyone we have right now, but Crowder at least has a little bit of that in him. So I want that void filled, because I am still concerned about that. Like, I do think Allen is an elite talent and can excel with whoever you put around him at this point in his career. But just to have that little extra, hey, I know that this guy will be right there and I can get him the ball, and to have that experience with him over 3 years is a big deal. now to build that relationship with Crowder or whoever the slot guy is, that's going to take a little bit of growing pains to get through. So I think early in the season we might see that bite us a bit, but as the season progresses, Thomas, like you said, Allen's still Josh. He's still Josh Allen. Like he's still going to be an incredible quarterback regardless of who you put on the field.
Here's my question to you though: if Beasley is that good, why is he still unsigned?
I mean, this is a thing a lot of vets do, though. They don't want to go to training camp. I mean, Julio Jones is not signed right now.
Yeah, how many vets are actually like still free agents just waiting?
I mean, OBJ isn't signed. That's because of his injury. So I think there's a good amount of guys that aren't signed. I've said if the Ravens sign Cole Beasley, we're in big trouble. I think he'd be great on the Ravens. I think he'd be great on the Packers. He'll get signed if he wants to get signed.
One team I'm terrified of him signing with is the Patriots. Terrified.
Yeah, he'd be very good, very, very good on the Patriots. And maybe he does that. He didn't leave Buffalo on the best of terms. So maybe there's a little bit of, I'm going to stick it to you. And honestly, he could. I do still think there's skill there. And I think, we'll see where he signs. But it's starting to get, a little later now. We're almost to July. He'll sign maybe right before training camp.
Yeah, I don't think Beasley lost a step. I think he was just too distracted, but trying to figure out if people were booing him or saying his last name.
That played into it. Yeah, for sure.
He was just like, what are they saying? Obviously, he's like, I think it's boo. And that's what he went with. But I wasn't there. I don't know. Also, were you at any of those games?
I was.
No. I only went to one last year.
You were, Tom?
Yeah, and they weren't.
There's people, like maybe somewhere, but there were people saying, no, we're saying his name.
Yeah, no, we were in the stands and there was absolutely, I'm sure there were people booing. Like there's people, like I said before, I'm sure there's people still want Josh Allen to fail. Whatever, who gives a shit. But for the full-on group or the people that were at the stadium, people were supporting Beasley. They always were. The problem is I think Cole Beasley has a couple screws loose and gets just voices inside of his head just telling him things that aren't there, and I think he just gets lost in his own mind because honestly he was so beloved. Like, so regardless of the vaccination stuff, people loved him. Like, and I absolutely loved him. I got to the point where I was sick of hearing him talk because he was just like, I think, and there's one thing about politics and football, when they're talking about like African Americans getting more rights or police brutality or women in sports or you have gay men coming out, like that stuff's important. It's a different thing when you're just trying to like vocalize just displeasure and just constant just belittlement of everything around you. And that's what I felt like Cole Beasley was it was like a toxic behavior, and it just kept going, and it was so prevailing that it was no longer we were talking about Cole Beasley, the football player. We're talking about Cole Beasley, the mouthpiece.
Yeah, definitely like overshadowed his play, but I kind of agree. I think it's like Joe Marino said with Cole Beasley. It's like, like I'd rather get ahead of like the decline because he's getting older. It's like than be like just behind it, and I'm sure
Patriots did.
Yeah, I'm sure he's absolutely got at least one more like good productive year. Like Hans said, like he'll sign with somebody and he'll have a good year. And who knows, maybe he'll have at least like 2 more good years in him. But anywho, so the wide receivers we're gonna go with that Hansel has here, and we haven't disputed at all, are Stephon Diggs, Gabriel Davis, Jamison Crowder, Isaiah McKenzie, Khalil Shakur, and I added Jake Kumar as a joke just because in case he's listening, I didn't want him to feel bad. So anyhow, starting with Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs' bests over his career has been 127 catches, 1,535 yards, and 10 touchdowns. The yardage was from the year before last. The 10 touchdowns was from last season, correct? I don't know where 127. I'm sure it was with Buffalo.
Yeah.
Hansel, you have the number that we're going to go off of, 100 catches for 1,200 yards and 8 touchdowns. What was last season? Was it about 1,330 yards, I think? A little over 1,300?
Don't even remember off the top of my head. I know it was right around 100 catches too.
So with I'll talk about reception yards. So 1535 was his first year.
1225 last year.
Okay,
he had 103 receptions, 1225 yards, and 10 TDs.
Okay, so 100 catches, 1208. I mean, I'm confident with hitting like the over on this, if not like right around like all of these numbers that Hansel provided. Thomas, let's go to you. What do you think?
I actually said today, somebody asked me about this at work, and I said we could potentially see like a Eric Mold's Peerless Price situation. And by that, I mean, with Davis and Diggs, I think Davis could benefit large from Diggs continuing just being so good at what he does that teams are going to have to double team him. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see a little bit of a dip in Diggs, production, and a massive jump in Davis. It's not going to be surprising if Davis does, because Davis is likely going to get 100 targets, 100 plus targets. So his numbers are just going to be inflated just sheerly based on that alone. But yeah, I wouldn't be, I don't think it's going to be like a massive like drop being under that 1225, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was like he had like 1150 yards or something. And maybe like instead of 10 TDs, he has like 7 TDs, and Davis also has like 7 to 10 TDs. Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me at all. And I think the other one is Dawson Knox. I think Dawson Knox is in line to have a pretty big year as well, especially on a contract season.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll say with the Diggs situation too, I do think there's going to be it's going to be interesting again at the start of the season. You're going to see them like super double Diggs. Like it's just going to be literally 2 guys pinned to him. Like they'll ignore even trying to help over the top, because they're going to say, we want to see Davis actually prove that he's a true wide receiver too. In years past, like last year, Emmanuel Sanders still had some respect at the start of the season. So they still had to say, we can't fully, go full bore and just say, we have to full on shut down Stephon Diggs. The year before for that, we still had John Brown and also Cole Beasley, for instance. So I think it's going to be at the start. It's going to say, Davis, prove to us that you can beat our CB2. But if Davis starts beating the CB2, like beating them up, and like he's truly this wide receiver 2 that Bills fans think he is, and that a lot of NFL experts are projecting, they are going to have to move a little bit off of Diggs and try to find a way to help on both of them. And if that happens, I could see Diggs' numbers somehow go up. It's going to be weird, like how they're going to split the targets here. I don't think you're going to see a massive dip with Diggs where like he's at like 950 receiving yards. Like that's not going to. Diggs is a 1,000-yard receiver. Will be during his entire tenure with the Bills, because Josh is going to feed him the ball. But I could see 900 or 90 catches for 1050, 1100 yards, and then still 6+ TDs. That'd be on the low end of the spectrum. You could also see him blow up again this year like he did 2 years ago. Who knows? But I think he's always going to be that pure wide receiver 1 that's right around 100, 1208. That's why I put those numbers there.
Quick shout out to Chris Janke for hitting us up in the comments section. Thank you for watching. For those who don't know, Chris is like the rules guru, right, on Twitter. If you have a question about like NFL rules, like that's your guy. So thanks for hitting us up, Chris. Chris, let us know what you think about Stephon Diggs' projections. I'm gonna put it up. Oh, caught up in NBA free agency, but he's not great. Yeah, so
Chris, don't say hi to me. I don't even care anyway.
With Stephon Diggs, I mean, like you said, like his stats could go. Like the numbers we talked about here, I think could be the minimum, but he could have another big year, because I don't think he's losing snaps at all. No. Like snap percentage, he's going to be out there. So, like Consul said, like if he gets double teamed, like the Chiefs did to him in the playoffs, great. I mean, not great. Like we'll see what happens, but he's not losing snaps. He's going to get the like opportunities to get those numbers. So, Thomas, I'm sorry. Did you give your feedback? Are we all good on Diggs?
Yep.
All right. So moving on, we're gonna do Gabriel Davis next. I feel like everybody is just. I mean, they want to see Gabriel Davis make the like Josh Allen leap, the Dawson Knox leap. I mean, those are 2 different leaps, so maybe not so much the Josh Allen leap, but they expect him to go off this season. I hope he does, but there's some people kind of speaking guarantees with him. They're like, he's going to have a breakout year. I say, I won't speak in any guarantees. Granted, he almost matched the statistics this year to last, and that was playing hurt like the first few games of the season.
Mhm.
So it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. But the numbers that Hans provided us was 50 catches, which I believe is an increase of about 15. 750 yards, which is an increase of about 150, and 8 touchdowns, which is an increase of 1 from his best. I think that's the baseline, right? That all of us are expecting from him. Anybody disagree?
Yeah, I put literally said this is the baseline. Like this is the minimum he has to do. So it's do you think essentially is he the wide receiver 2 this year, like the true wide receiver 2, or do you think someone else is? And then basically use those stats to back that up.
Yeah, I feel like all three of us are going to go with the over for this.
Yeah.
Thomas.
I think, man, Davis is like a media darling too now. I mean, people are starting to talk about him. And obviously it's recency bias, with that Chiefs game. He looked unbelievable. And I mean, quite possibly had the greatest game of any wide receiver in like NFL history in a playoff game. But even since Davis's rookie season, the guy just makes incredible catches that, in the Colts game, he was making those toe tappers right on the sideline.
Jesus.
Yeah, he's everywhere he's supposed to be. He makes the catches. He's dependable. He just seems like a really, like, man, I hate to say it, but like, with the culture stuff, but like they all bleed this shit, man. They're all so in lockstep, and they all I like with Dawson Knox. I don't know if you saw the Dawson Knox documentary or a little like the blue and red thing, but or whatever, but similar, they all have that very similar perspective. And I think you're going to see Davis, who just doesn't quit working. Like they've said, this offseason has just been grinding it. I think I would not be surprised if we have 2,000-yard receivers this year. And I wouldn't be surprised if both Davis and Diggs, not that the Pro Bowl means anything, but they could both make it because they, not that they'll play in it because we'll be in the Super Bowl, but all things considered, I think Davis is in line for a big ass year, like bigger than people anticipate Davis is going to have a year. I think he's like, I don't know. I'm excited. I'm really excited. But actually, so my wife and I, our big number is 13 in our life. We got married on the 13th. She got her dress on the 13th. Our first date was the 13th. A lot of 13s, tons. Like we found out we're pregnant on the 13th. Just like pretty cool stuff. So like the jersey I want to get is a Gabe Davis jersey, obviously. Yeah, I'm excited. I love Gabe Davis. I think he's gonna be a monster. It'll be fun.
All right, I'm gonna put up Chris's.
But yeah, probably the under.
I'm gonna put up Chris's comment here because I think it's gonna work as a nice segue to the next part. And he says, I expect Diggs to have a similar year to last year. I agree. I think the wide receiver core isn't as deep, but the additions of Crowder, Howard at tight end, and Cook at running back as a receiver should help Diggs. What I want to ask you guys is I kind of feel like last year it was Emmanuel Sanders and Gabe Davis kind of like going back and forth with that wide receiver tour. I feel like the first half of the season was Sanders. The second half was Davis. This year, I think Davis is supposed to step up. Who do you think fills in that third wide receiver statistic wise, like that we kind of have listed here? And like, maybe that's a combination of wide receivers. I know we didn't have this in our notes, but it's kind of just something that just came up to me. How do we make up for like that kind of apparent loss of a wide receiver 3 or almost like wide receiver 2A, 2B in a way?
Yeah. I mean, I think this goes to the Crowder, McKenzie, Shakir conversation, right? Like we're stacked with slot guys. And they can play outside in a pinch, but they're all three of these guys should be in the slot. It could literally go any way. Like if this at the start of the season, you tell me Khalil Shakir is a starting slot, I'd be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. You tell me McKenzie, makes sense. You tell me Crowder, makes sense. I personally lean on Crowder. I think he's going to kind of impress. And actually, for projection wise, like for our over under sake, I put Crowder at 60 catches, 600 reception or 600 yards, and 5 touchdowns. So right around where Davis, like the line I'd put Davis at. And the reason for that is just I think it fits our offense. It fits our style of play. Like the Bills are a big first down team. What was it? 2 years ago, I think they tied the record for most consecutive games of 20 plus first downs. Like they want to move the ball consistently. It's not always the big play. So Diggs and Davis on the outside, like Diggs can also play slot too, by the way, but Diggs and Davis on the outside are your
Damn it,
deep
another
guys.
slot.
Yeah,
And then
your deep guys. But Josh won't always be looking for them. He's going to look for Isaiah McKenzie running crossers, things like those. So if I'm going to say who's the wide receiver 3, so in the sense of slot guy, I'm going Jamison Crowder just because I've seen him consistently do it in the NFL. Maybe not at a super high level, but I've seen flashes of kind of brilliance from him. Like he had one game against the Bills with the Jets a couple of years ago where he just devoured us. I think he ended up having like 13 catches for 130 yards. So I like that. I've seen that with him. I've seen flashes from McKenzie, but they're so far and few between. Like I know people were obsessed with that Pats game. That was literally his entire season. Like that's all he did. And then Shakir, right? Like a 5th round pick that we value at a 4th round pick. 4th round pick receivers don't always work out. I mean, Gabe Davis in theory is working out. But Shakir is still like if he works out, that's great. If he doesn't, we'll all forget that pick ever happened because it was a 4th round pick. It's not like it was a 2nd, a 1st, or a 3rd. So for me, it's Crowder. But again, wouldn't be surprised if it was any of these 3.
Yeah, so the one I'm really intrigued about is James Cook. I've said it before as a 2nd round pick, kind of as a do-it-all guy. And he, from what they're saying, he could run the route tree, which I think is huge for a running back. And he's got size to him and speed, like breakaway home run speed. He might have some of the most home run speed of the applicable guys in this conversation for that 3rd role. So I agree with Chris. I think it could be Khalil Shakir as a sneaky pick for having a good year. What it really comes down to, and Josh is, not uncommon from other big receiver or big quarterbacks. It's whoever just builds a rapport with him quick enough.
Yep.
Quite frankly, whoever's able to be the guy to step up that Josh is like, yep, that's my guy, is going to be the one that's going to win the job. Because at the end of the day, they're going to ask Josh for his opinion on wide receivers, who he feels the most comfortable with, who he has rapport with. Because I wouldn't be surprised going forward if Josh has somewhat of a say in personnel in certain aspects, like what he thinks, his feedback on it. So it's going to come down to like who, impresses Josh enough and who that he can rely on. Because like you said, Hansel, he did have a very good relationship with Cole Beasley, and Josh wants that person that can save him sometimes because Josh gets a little scattered brained, and maybe James Cook is that guy, and he's sitting kind of behind Josh and can break out in the flat or, kind of sneak out to the sideline. Josh has that ability to dump it off. And if he can, expand on that little play style, kind of like what Brady used to do with, Edelman and James White. I think that could be a sneaky good piece or a wrinkle to this offense. But yeah, like you said, it's just going to be, it could be all by committee, or it could be just, like I said, whoever gets the first relationship.
So here's a question, and we keep talking about 12 personnel because of the signing of OJ Howard. Why is there not more discussion about like 21 personnel, like Singletary and Cook? Because I mean, don't want to like tip your cap, right? If Cook's out there, people might think, oh, this is a passing play, right? If Motor's out there, they think, this is most likely a running play. So why not more chatter about that? At least I haven't seen much of it. Have you guys?
I think the tough part is by doing so, which I guess you could, but the tough part is that lends you to just Diggs and Davis. So that's going to be difficult. So, but I mean, it'd be Singletary, Cook, Knox, Diggs, and Davis. It could potentially work in the sense that could be one of those wrinkles where it's kind of a disguised type of play. It looks like 21, but in fact, it's actually just 11 personnel because Cook's lining up in the slot. So like he's maybe under center, or they're both, kind of sitting behind Josh, but then, Cooks actually motions out to the slot. So you could very well, and that might be exactly what they do to kind of keep defenses on their heels.
That's what I'm thinking. You line them both up behind you, because then I feel like it keeps the defenses guessing. Like, it could be a passing play, it could be a rushing play. Like you said, maybe you motion Cook into the slot.
Okay.
Maybe you leave him there and he's running like I forget, like things like a Texas route or whatnot. He's in the flat, but you still have four wide receivers who's doing that, and you still have Devin Singletary as your dump off. Just an idea. Hansel, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, like mismatches. That's the most important thing for the Bills, and luckily for them, they have the biggest mismatch in the entire NFL in Josh Allen. And I've seen all these posts from all these national shows. I think Acho did one today, and it was the scariest quarterbacks, not the best quarterbacks, but what quarterbacks are the scariest to play against. And his number one was Josh Allen. He said, "This guy will jump over you. He'll juke you out of your shoes. He'll run through you. He'll throw a cannon over you. He'll dump a ball. Like, he's just terrifying, and he presents such a mismatch." So 21 personnel, 12 personnel, whatever we're doing, the biggest mismatch is him. And if you can confuse defenses even for a millisecond, essentially, just confuse them for a second where they put one guy out of place. When you have an elite quarterback, and Josh Allen is an elite quarterback, you won before you even snap the football. I was listening to the Pat McAfee show today, which is I personally think is an awesome football show. And he had Darius Butler on, who was an ex-corner for the Colts. And Butler said, he's like, the best quarterbacks in the NFL play chess. And you always hear people say they play chess. But his point was, he was like, they'll set you up for they'll do something in the second quarter where they're trying to set you up in the fourth quarter. And that's where I think 21 personnel, for instance, like you said, yeah, maybe we line up in 21 personnel and we run it, or we line up in 21 personnel and we just stay like in that, whatever, the pre-snap design is, snap the ball and there's a play. But then in the fourth quarter, you bring back out 21 personnel. That's the read they have on it. And you say, oh, James Cook is in the slot. And now that changes everything. Now, if the defense was reading, hey, I'm going to go off of what they were doing early in the game, and then you moved him out into the slot, that changes the entire complexity of that, that play. So I'd love to see it. And I think that Ken Dorsey, he looks like an evil like scientist. I think you're going to see some weird stuff this year, and all it's going to do is kind of make Allen even more dangerous and have more ability to kind of flash his technique and style of play.
Mm-hmm. At one point there, you made me think of like that meme that somebody always posts. It's like Josh Allen and like the do-rag and like the joint in his mouth. Just think of like 12 personnel, 20 personnel. Like, it doesn't matter. You have Josh Allen as your quarterback. You know what I mean? And did Acho put Mahomes as number one?
No. Josh was number one.
Okay.
Lamar Jackson was number two. Again, most scariest quarterback. So essentially, you're saying guys that could beat you in any way.
Yeah.
And then I think Mahomes was three. I don't remember the rest of the list, but I remember Allen Jackson.
There were other. I think a lot of people made those lists, and I would love to like get into that, but I feel like we'll just get too sidetracked. Yeah. So we'll say that for another one. But so of all that, back to Jamison Crowder, you have him at, the projection was 60 catches, 600 yards, 5 touchdowns. I think if he's healthy, he hits those numbers like across the board. Touchdowns, he could get 5, he could get 2, who knows? But 60 catches, 600 yards, absolutely. Thomas, what do you think?
Yeah, again, it's tough to say. I think the tough thing with the wide receiver core or any offensive options is that it's all dependent on kind of what Dorsey wants to do for one, and how everything kind of splits out. Because with Diggs, Davis, and Knox, they're going to eat up a huge chunk, in fact, and the offense is going to run straight through them. And then, like we were talking about with Singletary and probably James Cook, that's another big chunk. So I think my guess is the rest of those guys, whatever their numbers are probably lower. And I only say that because I think you're chopping the rest up amongst a bunch of guys that probably aren't going to get much of a share. It's kind of the line shares going in a different direction.
Mm-hmm. All right. Let's move on to Isaiah McKenzie. I know we kind of touched on him a little bit. We did not come up with a a projection for him, but his best has been 39 catches, 282 yards, 5 touchdown catches. I know he's got those 5 touchdown catches, but I'm
There were
sorry, like
these
those
the push
came,
passes.
yeah, those came in a season where the Bills like tied the record for the most players to catch a touchdown pass.
That's true too.
So I'm not taking it away from Isaiah McKenzie, but it's like, dude, you were in a system where everyone was eating, all right? And I remember he like even like went after someone on Twitter, was like, I had this many like touchdowns this past season. Like, it's like, yeah, like that's good. But again, everyone was eating, okay? Even Kumaro fucking had a touchdown. And he had like what, 3 targets the entire game. So I think Crowder is probably gonna win the slot guy. Everybody points to that Pats game with Isaiah McKenzie, but like you said, Hansel, that's like his entire career. He's never been able to do that again. Even when Beasley came back, the Bills said thank you. Like, he's the slot guy again. So McKenzie has to compete with an actual slot receiver in Jamison Crowder, and I just don't really see him winning that position. History says Crowder might miss a couple games because he does have some injury things. But if that's the case, maybe McKenzie gets a shot. But he's also kind of fight that with Khalil Shakur. So yeah, I don't. I see Ken McKenzie just being the same thing. I see him just falling back into that gadget role, getting the opportunity to win the return jobs. See how that goes. And that's my thoughts on Isaiah McKenzie. Hansel, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that Patriots game super inflated his stats. So just to kind of to give a little, I guess, context to it, right? He had 178 receiving yards last season. 125 of those came in the Pats game. So outside of the Patriots game, he had 53 receiving yards. He had 20 catches on the season. 11 of them came in the Pats game. So outside of that, he had 9 catches. So
he was a healthy scratch one game or two because of his return thing. So there was even a game where McDermott says, I'm not even going to use you in the offense or as a wide receiver. So
exactly.
Sorry.
No, you're right. The one, and I know people are kind of upset, are done with McKenzie in punt return and kick return because he tripped over himself in the Colts game. And essentially that was the end of the game. Like, we were still probably going to lose that game, but the second that happened, we were going to get the ball back down by 2 score. And in theory could go down and keep it with a 1-score game. He fumbled that ball, got returned to the 3-score game, game's over. He also had a couple, fumbles on punt return. So a little bit of a mess in the return game. When McKenzie was actually returning punts or returning kicks,
he was deadly.
When he had the ball, he might have been the best return man in football when he literally returned the football. He was
once he had the ball in his hands, you're like, you got excited. You had to hold your breath and wait for him to actually like secure it, and then you're like, all right, now I'm on board. Let's do this.
I think in the Titans game, at the very end of the game, he returned one for a touchdown.
Yeah, and it got called back.
It got called back for a hold. I think Dodson had the hold. I'm not sure though. Or Andre Smith, I think.
A linebacker.
But either way, so for me, McKenzie, I'm right with you, Jeremy. I think he's the gadget guy. He's going to compete for the return spot, and maybe if you're McDermott, you just say, McKenzie, you are our return guy this year. You're literally going to sit and catch bombs from Matt Araiza the rest of the preseason, and you're not going to fumble one. You got to catch every single one and just try to force him to get those hands right. I don't know if you can fix it, but man, I loved watching him on return.
I want to pull up Chris's comment, and then I want to turn it over to Thomas, if that's okay. Or Thomas, did you want to get your comment?
I was just going to say, like, you kept talking about the hands. All I can think about is that kid from Little Giants that's sitting there and, looking at his hands, and he's like, what did I ever do to you? I wash you, I clip your nails.
So Chris says, I personally like having McKenzie around, knowing Crowder's injury history. Like I said, Crowder does have that injury history. And like I said, history says there's a good chance he misses a couple games. But also remember the Bills, medical and training staff, who knows, maybe he plays every damn game because of all that. But I think, it's Crowder's job, and McDermott basically, breaks a pool stick in half, tosses it to McKenzie and Shakur and says, hey, who wants the backup slot? The worst. No one's going to die, but it's like, you're either going to be the backup slot or the backup or the assistant to the backup slot wide receiver. So yeah, I totally agree. And like I said, at the very least, McKenzie is the gadget guy. And again, he's the locker room guy. He is a glue guy. Like, they love that too. So, Thomas, your opinion and just about McKenzie's contribution to this offense this season?
Well, I'd love to see him get more. Personally, I think just every single year he just doesn't really. I don't know. Every time he touches the ball, he flashes. That's what just doesn't make sense to me. I don't know why he doesn't get more of a chance, because like every game when they have him come in, he delivers. The guy just is like, he is everything you would expect out of a talented wide receiver and more, because he's I don't know. I don't know why they have like, I don't know if there's something that we don't know about as to why. Like maybe they're just keeping him fresh, or they only want to use him certain times, so it's more like scheme fit. I don't know. That's for those smart, super smart football people like, Bean and McDermott. My hope is that he gets a lot more opportunity this year because Beasley's gone. I would love nothing more than McKenzie to win the slot job like that. If dream scenarios were possible, I would love it to be Diggs, Davis, and Beasley, or Diggs, Davis, and McKenzie. I think McKenzie can do everything and more. He's got so much speed and burst. I don't know why people think he's slow. I don't know why we don't talk about him being fast, because McKenzie is really fast.
People say McKenzie's slow.
Well, they just don't I don't know. They don't parallel him to like being as fast as he really is. When they talk about the fast guys on the team, for some reason, McKenzie's name doesn't come to the forefront, and he might be one of, if not the fastest dude on the team. I mean, his jet sweeps, the way he's able to turn the corner, like in the Patriots game, he absolutely sliced and diced and had no problem. He was just, cutting through like wind. So I don't know. Like Chris said, like you guys said, if he can secure the ball, he's got at least that job. I would like to see more in terms of like his ability to actually get more reps and get more opportunity in the wide receiver core and potentially get that slot job. I think he has more to offer than what we're giving him.
Yeah. Chris says, when McKenzie transitioned to returning punts last year, it was almost like McDermott said that's all you're going to do, and didn't believe he could handle wide receiver reps and return duties. I think McDermott wants his return guy to just do returns. I think he just wants to keep him fresh. I don't think he wants him that involved in the offense. I mean, when Andre Roberts was here doing the returns, like, you barely saw him really contribute like as a wide receiver. And
Andre Roberts wasn't a great wide receiver, though. That's the only problem. Is I think McKenzie's proven he could be viable.
Yeah, and I know like some Bills fans are irritated with that. They're like, if you're a wide receiver, I want to see you catch the ball. And it's like, some of them are just a wide receiver by name. Like, they're a specialist, like Andre Roberts. He was a return specialist. Isaiah McKenzie, like Thomas said, like, we've seen what he can do like as a wide receiver. And because of that, Bills fans is like, we want to see him do it. Like, we want to see him do more, but McDermott just has this thing. And I don't know. Like you said, Thomas, like the smart people make those decisions. I don't know. Hansel, anything to add to that?
No. I've seen the flash from McKenzie, but we've never seen it consistently. And until I do, I can't believe that I will. I'll be talking about the return game literally all off season, probably through the season. I will put a massive amount of money on it that Micah Hyde at some point in time this season is returning punts, just because my biggest concern, I love the flash of McKenzie returning punts, returning kicks. At the end of the day, though, this offense is going to be so good that if we might get 3 return touchdowns this year, which would be a big number, if we get 3 return touchdowns, but we lose the ball 5 times on fumbles, I'd rather us just give it to our offense. Like, just give me my offense, let my offense go, and I don't have to worry about the fumbles. And if Micah Hyde has to sit back there and fair catch all game, it's fine. Fair catch it every single play.
Yeah, give it to Josh at the 23 instead of like, a risk trying to get us to the 36 or 37.
Yeah, there is no like, in theory, Josh, though, okay, it's 13 extra yards he has to throw for. That'll just boost his MVP numbers. Fine.
Yeah. There you go. So that's Isaiah McKenzie, Khalil Shakur. Hansel, you provided a projection, 30 catches, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. I mean, of course, we all want to see like a rookie wide receiver just come in and light it up. But like I said, there is a lot of competition at the slot wide receiver position. If Khalil Shakur gets 30 catches, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, I'm happy with that. But I think I'd also like to see him probably compete for one of the return jobs, which I think is possible. He returned, was it punts in college or just kicks?
He returned a few punts in college, but it's not any
Mostly
big number
kicks?
where no, I don't think he ever did kicks. I might have
Okay.
that backwards, but
I was under the impression he had more return ability. So, with that, 30, 303, I could see that being the case. I would just say near. It's tricky because, like I said, he's brand new to the NFL. You don't know how well he's going to acclimate. So, there's my thoughts.
yeah, and I'll hop in like Shakir. So just to I guess kind of correct myself, he had 24 total punt returns in college in 43 games played. So those aren't big numbers, right? And he had 7 kick returns. So I know people are saying he has the return abilities. I've seen that over and over again. Again, also returning in college is kind of meaningless to me because Marquez Stevenson had good return numbers and we saw him and I was not impressed by him. But
He's
going to
boring as all hell. He's so boring
Yeah.
to watch return
He
kicks.
is.
It's
Yeah.
straight line. That's all. But when it comes to Shakir, I'm going to actually bundle Shakir and Cook in this conversation because I actually was looking at this just now too. I wanted to compare Cook and Shakir's catch radius, right? So let's say their height, their arm length, their like burst ability, so their ability to jump. Because in theory, like Thomas has said a few times here, we could just motion Cook out and he can play slot. Like Cook could be the slot guy. And that kind of pushes Shakir off. Like we don't need Shakir then for the slot position. And when you look at I'm using RAS by MathBomb for this. When you look at their size, their arm length, their hand size, their explosive ability, all the numbers are nearly identical. Like literally almost, they have the same exact broad jump. Shakir has a slightly bigger vertical by 1.5 inches. James Cook's hands are almost the same size, but his arms are longer. Like they literally
they're just two
almost
Spider-Mans pointing at each other.
Yeah, they're essentially the same, I guess, body on paper.
Okay.
So it makes me say, like, all right, if I had to pick, let's say you can have Cook can go for 3,300 or 3 and 3, or Shakir's going to go 3,300 and 3. Which one do I think is more likely to do that? I'd say I think more likely is James Cook, just because I'm fairly confident he'll get the opportunity to do so. With those numbers as Shakir, I just don't know. I don't know if he can get to 30 catches, especially when we saw Gabe Davis barely get to 30 catches.
Well, I think James Cook is like almost automatically our RB2, whereas
yes.
Shakir is
he might be wide receiver 5.
Yeah.
So that's where I go with that.
Yeah. 300. I don't know. I like Shakir, man. I think he could be really, really special. Same thing with James Cook. I don't know. Every year I think draft picks can do more than they really do. I think I've got this innate sense of optimism.
But like when you play Madden, you're like, I'm gonna target the shit out of this 5th round wide receiver. Like
exactly. I had the same feel for Zay Jones though. When Zay Jones came out of ECU, I had that same feeling that he could be really big. I mean, now apparently he is. He just only ran naked through hotel lobbies when he was with us.
Hey, that's behind him. He is now on the Jaguars and he's getting paid.
That's right. God bless him. I think I could see Shakir getting more than 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. Again, you're playing with Josh Allen. And if Josh Allen loves this kid, it's, you could see him getting 800 yards and, 9 touchdowns for all we know. If he's just a really good, especially I think the big thing, and what never really made sense to me, is for as good as Beasley was, he wasn't a touchdown machine. He just really wasn't. He was get to the sticks, catch the ball, turn and dive. But if Shakir can potentially be like more of a threat for Josh, then we might see more in terms of his offensive output. Because that was something that I feel like was a big issue. And then the other part is Josh even said this offseason he's been working to boost yards after the catch, like putting the ball in a better position for the receivers to be able to run after the catch. So if Shakir can truly be as dynamic, as his hands is as good as they are, and runs really crisp routes, you could see him being really, really good and being even more than what Beasley was, because Shakir's fast. I gotta look at the numbers real quick, but I think Shakir might be as fast or faster than Beasley.
Oh,
Yeah,
I think he ran a 4.43.
Yeah.
Right.
And Cook ran
Yeah.
like a 4.42.
4.42,
It's almost
yeah.
surprising seeing the Bills draft players who are running like sub 4.5 40s, right?
Yeah.
After Gabe Davis was like just above like Moss and Hodgins, and Motor were a little bit higher. Just kind of a joke. It just seemed like speed wasn't really ever their thing. It's like, nah, we're gonna go for just getting open or vision and hands and whatnot. But
Coles was a 4.49 back in 2012. So
yeah, inflation.
Right. So I mean, you're talking. I mean, Shakir's got him just in that alone, and if he can potentially be more dynamic than Beasley in terms of, potentially getting into the end zone for Josh, you'll see Shakir out there all the time, because that's the thing is, not only is it Josh wanting him to actually succeed or be in the offensive game plan, but Dorsey's going to want that too, because at the end of the day, whatever's going to make Dorsey potentially get a head coaching job, Dorsey's going to do.
True.
All right. Moving on to before we move on to tight ends, the last wide receiver, Jake Kumaro. I'm going to throw a projection out there.
I'm going to say 4 catches for 12 yards.
No. 1 catch, half a touchdown, over under. Hansel, what you got?
I'm going out. He's going to catch a touchdown pass this year. I am very confident of that.
Okay.
Is that going to under a half a touchdown, a quarter of a touchdown?
Which week is that going to be part of your Bills shot bets?
When they play the Packers.
Oh,
yeah.
That's some pettiness.
100%. It's happening that game. I put a bet on it right now.
Thomas, what did you say your over under / projection?
I'm not even sure if he's going to have an offensive stat line this year. I think that one touch.
Yeah, he didn't have a target last year, right? Yeah.
Here's the thing. I think there's one way he could have it, and it's the end of the season. If the Bills lock up the 1 seed going into like week 17, then yes, Kumaro could absolutely see the field and play a ton. And
has maybe like a Duke game against the Jets.
Right. Has like 6 catches, 45 yards, and a touchdown. That could be his stat line right there for the whole season.
And by the way, he had 2 catches for 28 yards last year. Thank you very much.
Did he really?
Oh, did he have 2?
Wow.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to pull this up on YouTube. I don't.
He is so memorable.
Oh man, I'm ashamed I don't remember that.
Don't be ashamed, because I didn't either.
All right, so moving in to our tight ends. The only tight ends we're talking about is Dawson Knox and OJ Howard, and I want to pull up one of Chris's comments, and he said, "How much do you see Howard eating into Knox's snaps, or do you see them being used on the field at the same time? It's hard to know with the new Ken Dorsey. I feel like OJ Howard is just too good of a signing to just be looked as a backup." So we mentioned, like, yeah, sure. Like, we said, as far as 12 personnel snaps goes, we were 8% last year. Maybe that bumps up 5%, like Thomas said, and we agreed with that. Maybe as high as like 20. So, like, I think having them both on the field is something you should take advantage of. But we also said, let's definitely use him to keep, Knox fresh. So, Chris, as far as your question goes, I think we took both sides. So we talked about that a little bit. Let's talk about Dawson Knox. His best season was all across the board, probably last season. 49 catches, 587 yards, 9 touchdowns. And Hansel, the projection you came up with, well, not projection, just stat line to bet the over-under, was 40 catches, 600 yards, and 8 touchdowns. So very similar. Not much difference. Hansel, I'm gonna let you start off with this. What do you think?
Yeah, so here's where I'm gonna go with this. I think that Bills fans overhype Dawson Knox, and I really like Dawson Knox. I also like how he looks, to be honest. He's a very good looking man. But outside of that,
Agreed.
a lot of his catches last year, like if you go back and watch a lot of his touchdown catches or a lot of his big game like catches, he was just wide open, like no one was covering him. And I don't think that was necessarily like he made a double move on somebody. I think he just ran like a go route, and they essentially were like, oh, "Where's Diggs? We got to go cover Diggs." And they chased Diggs, and Knox is wide open. The reason I say all this, there's this talk that people have where they insist Dawson Knox is a top 5 tight end. He's not a top 5 tight end to me. I don't think he can be by the end of the season, to be honest. But I do think he can be a pretty decent, like he's a top 10 tight end to me. And in that regard, that's why I put the numbers just about the same, 4,608. So right around what he had last season. I don't really see him making a jump over that. Like, I don't think you're going to see, I don't know, 60, 1,012, something like that. I wouldn't, if he does, it's not going to be like the biggest surprise in the world to me. But again, I don't really see him just like all of a sudden blowing up and being Travis Kelce or being George Kittle or being Rob Gronkowski, like those guys. He just isn't that player, in my opinion.
Thomas, what do you think?
I think the one thing that keeps happening, very similar to Josh Allen, is every year Dawson Knox gets better. And I don't think it's by accident. And I think when you've got a guy playing in a contract year, guy's going to see a lot of targets, and he's going to see a lot of improvement, and he's going to probably excel or exceed any expectations. It's generally speaking happens. It's almost like clockwork. Shaq Lawson wasn't that great the year before his contract year. His contract year, dude looked like a Pro Bowler. So can I see Dawson Knox excel from last year? Yeah, absolutely. And maybe I'm a homer, and yeah, and Daniel Sorensen actually got better at the end of the year, by the way. He actually looked significantly better the second time around.
I think it's so funny. There's like that image where somebody was like, Sorensen, like I think giving up a catch, and one of his like teammates is just like his body language is like, what the fuck, like what are you doing? So it's just it's fun to kind of pick on him a little bit. But Thomas, go and finish.
I don't know. I think Knox has all the potential to have another breakout season, but like a legit, like the one that like sits there and the rest of the NFL takes notice type of thing, where he's no longer just the Dawson Knox, that's a good fantasy tight end, to where people are like, Dawson Knox, that dude is a fucking monster. Like, I feel like that's what you're going to see this year is Dawson Knox taking over even more than he did. And that's just personal, my personal preference. I think he is absolutely, if he's not top 5, he's teetering right there, maybe 6. I think he is uber talented, and he's just, you have to think he was a college quarterback, and he only played a very short period of time as a tight end. He's still scratching the surface, like Greg Rousseau, just learning the nuances of being a tight end. So you're seeing him now getting better and better and better, and like that red and blue video had of him. He's got the support of his family, and he's an unbelievable person who puts everybody else first. I wouldn't be surprised if he just continually blossoms and becomes just this like dynamic weapon that we wanted since like Jay Reamersma,
Yeah. I agree with Tonsil. Like, I'm fine with if you say he's not a top 5. Like, I'm okay with that because like we said, his best season was 587. Like that's good. That's not elite. 9 touchdowns is great, but like I said, he's been a part of a Bills team where everybody is getting the ball. But I also agree with Thomas. If he's not top 5, then he's like 6 or 7. And I also think he's going to benefit because I have to pick out 2 plays. And not so much plays as I'm going to point out the touchdown celebrations. There's the one where they do like the hot rod bow, and then they have him and Josh Allen have the prom pick. So I think Dawson Knox is going to benefit from the fact that him and Josh work out touchdown celebrations beforehand, and they want to get those done. So it's like Josh, like, dude, like you better get this, or at least toss it to me for this 2-point conversion, because we have this choreographed dance that we're going to do later. So that has to happen, and it's going to. So that's my Dawson Knox take. And then moving on to OJ Howard, his best has been 34 catches, 565 yards, and 6 touchdowns. That was probably all before Rob Gronkowski joined the team. The line that Hans provided us was 30 catches, 400 yards, and 4 touchdowns. I am totally happy with that because, I mean, last year we were carrying 2 tight ends and one of them was a healthy scratch towards the end. So to have a second tight end who could give us those numbers, totally cool with that. Whoever wants to go for it.
Yeah, I think
you can go. Yeah.
OJ Howard, you're going to see that inline kind of tight end. He's got more speed than Dawson Knox. But again, it's all hinged on how well his recovery is going and if he's ever going to be the same guy again. He hasn't really ever been to what his draft status was from Alabama. I mean, hasn't really lived up to anything for being as highly touted as he was.
But you said this is where people come to flourish.
Absolutely. And I wanted the Bills to draft him 100%. So, and again, I think in this scenario, he absolutely can flourish because he was buried, behind Cameron Brate, behind Gronkowski. Even Mike Evans, to be honest with you, is kind of an odd wide receiver because he's built like a tight end. He's like 6'5". He kind of he alleviates the necessity to have a tight end because he can do all the same things, but he's faster. So I think having OJ Howard here, where you have a quarterback that can make more time, and OJ Howard can find a soft spot in the zone. Maybe you see him flourish a little bit more. And he's going to have more opportunity, just surely based on there's more of a target share available on the team than there was over in Tampa.
Yeah, and I'm actually with Thomas. In 2017 when he was drafted, he went 19th overall to Tampa, right? We traded down in that draft. That's where Kansas got Patty Mahomes and we got Trey White. When the Bucks took him at 19, I was like, oh, come on. He was the guy I wanted. We didn't get him. We ended up getting Trey White. And when the Bills drafted Trey White, I was like, all right, I don't really know this guy, but maybe he'll be good. Turns out Trey White is an all-pro. OJ Howard never has been. So again, smarter people than me made that decision for good reason. But saying that, OJ Howard was touted coming out of Alabama for a reason. He's a freak athlete. He was extremely talented for Alabama. And he just has never really lived up to that. And that's why he signed a contract with Buffalo. I would bet you he could have got offers elsewhere for much more money. Let's say $2-3 million more. The reason I think he came to Buffalo is he said, I'm going to come on a 1-year deal. I'm going to get to play with Josh Allen. Josh is going to make me look really, really good. And then next offseason, I'll go sign a contract for $14 million a year. I think that's what he's banking on. And I think he has the raw, skill set to do that. It's just how will the Bills use him? So when I put the numbers down, which was 3,300 or 3,404, I can see 4 touchdowns because I could see 12 personnel being a big weapon the Bills use in the end zone. All right, cover OJ Howard and Dawson Knox. Good luck. Plus Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen can run the ball. What are you going to do? I actually have no idea what teams will do. But the 30 catches and 400 yards, then it's we got to play this balancing game, right? If Gabriel Davis is going to have 75 catches, let's say, and Diggs is going to be at his 100, and then we say Shakir is going to be at, let's say Shakir gets 20 and Knox gets 40 or 50. There's a point in time where the numbers can only go so high. Josh isn't going to throw it 70 times a game, even though I'd love to see that. So can Howard hit 30? Can he hit 400? He could. I think that's why I think he eats maybe a little bit of Knox's potential numbers this season. But I don't see him having this crazy year. I don't really know where I'd go with these numbers here. I think that they're under 400, right around 30 catches and 4 or 5 touchdowns is what I go for OJ.
And who knows? Maybe we trade him back to the Buccaneers
Bucs
for a 5th-round pick.
Honestly, I think you're going to see a couple bean trades happen at the end of training camp. I wouldn't be if they traded OJ Howard and they got a pick for him because they're essentially look, we really can't, like, we just, our personnel grouping so tight right now. We need to find a way to get these other guys on the field. I'd be like, all right, okay. I know people would be upset. They're like, they want to see the 2 tight end sets, but I think you're going to see him trade. He might trade a slot guy. He might trade Crowder. He might trade. He's definitely going to trade offensive lineman. You're going to see some trades here from.
Yeah. And per Matt Perino, he actually has said that, Howard has not looked
good.
that great in training camp. He actually said he's looked like robotic, like he's just learning something so new that he's just almost sounds like he just doesn't look like comfortable yet. So if that continues, maybe Dorsey's like, you know what, fuck 12 personnel. Let's stick with 11. Let's stick with spread. And yeah, trade him for a 5th. Trade him for Lee Smith's retirement. Bring him back or something. I don't know. Yeah. But guys, I think this is a good place to stop.
Yeah.
We thought it would be a shorter one, but we all just love talking to each other so much because of the tense sexual attraction and Hansel's chest hair showing out. Yeah. So we dragged this out as much as we could. But anyways, we are going to end there. Thank you so much to Chris Janke for chiming in on the comment section and being a part of the conversation. Tell your friends. My name is Jeremy. You can find me on Twitter at Back of the Herd. You can find the podcast Twitter at Process on Tap. You can find Hansel at Uber Hansen, and he is again going to be contributing for cover 1, some writing pieces coming up. You can find Thomas on Twitter at the Thomas DeLas and Buffalo Late Night, which is live Monday nights. At what time, Thomas?
Monday nights, every 9:30 Eastern. You can find it twitter.com/BFLO Late Night, and every other Twitch, YouTube, other stuff. It's just Buffalo Late Night. But come join us. It's fun.
All right. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching and or listening. And if you want Hansel to bleach his chest hair, let us know on Twitter. Go Bills.
Go Bills.
I love you, Josh Allen.